If you want your jeans to look something like this, I have the perfect tutorial for you. But before we get into the actual tutorial, I got 3 things I want to talk about. My channel, Philllllthy inspiration, and free patches that I'm handing out for anyone that wants to do this patchwork at home. First off, my channel, I want to thank everyone that has subscribed to me so far. And in celebration of finally hitting 1K subs, I'm going to put together a mini giveaway. So stay tuned for the next video where I'll have some more details on that. Secondly, shout out to Philllllthy. He's a big inspiration behind the patchwork of these jeans. He's done some incredible work in the past, and I know he's got some crazy stuff coming. So check out his IG. I'm gonna put the link in the description. He's a big inspiration of mine, so I would highly recommend checking him out. Thirdly, last of all, before we get into the tutorial, if you wanna do patchwork at home, I have a bunch of donated fabric here, all courtesy of the Fabric Room. They're a local Toronto store that is very generous. The staff is very kind. What I'm gonna do is put together a little box of patches for anyone that wants free fabric. And these are high quality pieces of fabric. So head on over to gloryisland.com or click the link in the description below. Add Patchwork patches to your cart. It's first come, first serve. You just have to pay for shipping and it's all yours. Those are the 3 things that I wanted to cover before we got into the tutorial. So now that we've done it, let's get started. So quick breakdown of this video. I'm going to show everyone what typically comes in an embroidery set, some of the items you'll need, and I'll show you how to start and end a stitch, and then a few tips and tricks for your own patchwork. All you're going to need is the old pair of jeans, some embroidery thread. They usually come with a few colors, and then some of them even include some tools that you can use. And you're going to need some hoops. They usually come in a few different sizes. And then you're gonna want to get a bunch of fabric. I got here a bunch of old fabric. I've got stuff from old projects, hand-me-downs, stuff that never fit but I kept, and now I'm just gonna cut the stuff up and put it on the jeans. Another useful tool actually, if you want to get a little bit more crazy, is to get this seam ripper. This helps take out seams, takes out stitches. If you want to get maybe underneath the back pocket, or if you want to undo some of the pants and get this stuff under that stuff more, it's a good tool to have. A lot of packages actually come with your own little seam ripper. With these, you're supposed to wrap the thread around it. They usually come with like 10 or 20 because there's so many different colored threads. When you get thread, it's usually pretty thick because it's a bunch of threads wrapped around. So a lot of the time people will take apart the thread. They basically just make the thread skinnier, and it's just preference if you want your thread to be thicker or not. So these bobbins allow you to store split thread easily. Next up in our package of goodies, we got the needles. Pretty straightforward, like your standard needles. I actually ended up subbing mine out and using one of my own needles because it was just sharper. When it's dull, it just makes it that much harder to pierce through the fabric, especially if you have a really tightly woven fabric. So I swapped mine out, but within this package of like 10 or 20 little needles, look through them. Some of them are actually sharper than others. I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but it'll make it a lot easier if you find a sharp needle. Another item that's absolutely necessary for this project are these hoops. And I've seen a good amount of debate whether to get bamboo or wooden hoops versus the plastic ones. In my opinion, if you're gonna do embroidery and leave it on the hoop, then buy the wooden ones because they just look better. Otherwise, the plastic ones will probably outlast the wooden ones. Also, if you look here, the screw on the plastic one was a lot longer than the wooden one. And that's gonna help a lot when you're dealing with thicker fabrics like jeans when you have 4 or 5 patches and you're trying to get that outer hoop to go around the small hoop. One of the last few items you might come across is like this thick interfacing fabric. If you want to embroider directly on these, that's chill, but you won't need this for jeans because jeans are generally pretty thick fabric, so they're rigid enough that your embroidery will still have its own structure. There's no secret formula for calculating how big of a thread you need to cut for a patch. You could wrap it around this patch and say, okay, maybe I need that much, but honestly with this type of patchwork, you could do multiple threads in one patch. It won't really matter. So to thread the needle, some sets will come with this helper tool. You put the helper tool through the needle hole, insert the thread through the tool, and then pull the tool out of the needle. Now that we have the needle threaded, I'm going to show you guys how you can start and end your stitch by doing it on this practice material. So first things first, take the threaded needle, grab one end of the thread, whether it's a thick thread or thin, and tie a knot. This is what's gonna hold the beginning stitch in. So I'm gonna grab a hoop, take it apart. I'm gonna put the smaller one underneath and the big one on top and just squeeze it in on itself. You're gonna start with the needle from the bottom and you're gonna go underneath, through, and under. Then on the back side, when you flip it over, you'll see you have the two threads here going through, but the one with the knot isn't gonna make it all the way through. So you pull, 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 and you can see one gets caught. I'm gonna pull this back, and then I'm gonna split the thread and put this needle through it. Now it's being held down there. I'm gonna flip my fabric back over, and I'm gonna go over, pull it all the way through and back. This is kind of like the reverse stitch that you do on a sewing machine. Now I'll show you guys again from the back side. I'm gonna go ahead and do the far side of the stitch and then come back to complete the stitch. And that's how I would start it, and then I would just keep going forward. Now to end it, I would do something similar where I would push my needle through. I would do another reverse stitch at the end where I go ahead of myself and then come back. And then once on the back side, I would take the last stitch that I did and I would just push the needle through and tie it around a few times, 2 or 3 times, pull through. Then I would tie a knot here and cut it off. And that's how you start and end the stitch. Now that we've run through the basics, you guys know what tools you need, you know how to start and end a stitch. I'm gonna run through a few tips for you to consider on your own patchwork project. Tip number 1 is play with the thread. Change up the colors, match or contrast your patches, change the thickness, so use some thick thread and then change it up, split it, and use some thin thread. And then also just change the direction of the stitching. You know, sometimes you could do a straight line, sometimes do it on an angle or make some X's. Sometimes you'll have some more decorative stitches than they are functional. It's up to you, it's what makes yours unique. Tip numero 2 is a lot of the patches that you put on, you're gonna see the edges, and sometimes you don't want that clean cut with scissors. So tear the fabric if you're strong enough, or if you're not, or you just don't want to tear it, take a pair of tweezers and just pick at the edges, and you can make it look more frayed than it actually was. That will give it a bit more character as well. Alright, tip number 3. You could start from the base, stitch everything down, and just keep layering and layering and layering. But that's going to be a lot of stitching, and it just takes a lot of time. So if you want to skip that process, grab some pins so you can hold everything down in the final arrangement that you're imagining. It's kind of a shortcut, but it'll save you a ton of time because these pants alone took 2 or 3 nights, and that was me going as fast as I could. So if you want to enjoy it over a few weeks, sure, just go from the base up. But if you want to shortcut it a little bit, stack them all on, pin them down, and then stitch them in. And the last tip from me is when you start layering a bunch of patches on top, it gets really thick, and so it gets a little bit harder to put the hoop on, especially if you have a short screw. So I would put the hoop on and I would just thread or stitch in that one hoop as much as I can before I took off the hoop, because moving the hoop around was my bottleneck. So I just wanted to make the most out of every time I placed it. So that's it for today's tutorial. It's a great way to revive some old jeans, maybe get into some sewing for the first time. Check out the link below for a box mixed with a bunch of designer fabrics for you to use on your own patchwork. If you end up doing this patchwork, tag me on IG so I can share the work that everyone's doing. The IG handle is @glory.allen with an A. Stay tuned for the next video where I'll share some details on the 1K giveaway. And that's it. Peace. I actually don't get why I can't rip this one fabric. I did it before, and then the second I turn on the camera, all of a sudden I can't rip it.